So we'll have the Dharma talk for adults now. The polarization of American society has never been clearer than in the past week. The horrific insurrection at the US Capitol, with its images of hatred and rage and violence, overwhelmed the reality that COVID-19 is surging across the world, and thousands of people are dying every day, right here in the United States. So faced with horrifying video of violence and destruction of the Capitol, the US Capitol, the very symbol of American democracy, it is all too easy for me to give in to anger. But we must not forget the tragic human cost of both the insurrection and the relentless spread of COVID-19. Thousands of people are dying every day. Let us take a moment of silence to reflect upon the lives lost, as well as the pain and suffering of the family and friends and communities who have been left behind. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. In this situation, it's all too easy to become outraged at the divide between people in our nation. It's all too easy to give in to anger, rage, and hatred. It's all too easy to insist my side is right and the other side is wrong. So when the other side refuses to accept my side's view, conflict is inevitable. And thus, conflict continues, hatred is inflamed, and violence is triggered. Shakyamuni Buddha taught the Dharma this truth. Hatred does not cease through hatred at any time. Hatred ceases through love. This is an unalterable law. The words of Shakyamuni Buddha in the Dhammapada, verse number 5. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. So this is perhaps the most popular Buddha quote you'll find on social media like Facebook and Instagram. But how many of us have actually been able to let go of our anger, our hatred, and then responded to hatred with love? Especially as the events of the past week unfolded, I felt my hatred for stupidity, self-centeredness, and rage increase exponentially. What's wrong with these stupid people? And at the exact same time, the other side is saying, what's wrong with these stupid people? About my side. Soon, we are flaming and trolling each other in social media, and ultimately attacking the other side in the real world. So as much as we can all see the truth of the Buddha's words, it is the most difficult of difficulties to actually turn that truth into our thoughts, words, and actions. The Buddha taught that human ego's clinging attachment to self-centeredness, is the cause of our suffering and the suffering of others. And we saw this Dharma, we saw this truth in action before our eyes last week. Again, the wisdom of Shakyamuni Buddha. Victory only breeds hatred, for the defeated live in misery. But a person abandoning ideas of victory and defeat realizes inner peace and lives happily. The wisdom of Shakyamuni Buddha in the Dhammapada, verse 201. Namo Amida Butsu. If my side wins, then by definition, the other side loses. Winners and losers. And the cycle of anger, hatred, and violence continues. Thus, to realize inner peace, the Buddha says we must abandon the very idea, the very concept of victory and defeat. Obviously, that's not going to be easy, because from a Shin Buddhist perspective, we are all hopelessly attached to our self, our ego. And thus, our thoughts and words and actions are all driven by our fundamental selfishness, self-centeredness. which is driven by the three poisons of anger, greed, and stupidity, in the sense that we know better, but we still do stupid things. And remember, the three poisons, these three poisons are only 3 of the 108 fondo, the blind passions that cause physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual suffering in human life. This wisdom is also found in the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Nonviolence is the answer to the critical political and moral questions of our time. The need for man to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to oppression and violence. Man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. The wisdom of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, Stockholm, Sweden, in 1964. Nonviolence is the answer. Love is the answer. Again, we can all agree Dr. King's wisdom is clear and compelling. And yet I find myself chanting in my head, lock him up, lock him up, lock them up, lock them up. Or impeach the bastard, that'll show him. Or invoke the 25th Amendment, that will show them. Because my anger leads to a craving for revenge, for victory, for winning, for owning the other side. And I'm supposed to be a Buddhist priest and a temple minister. Actually, I am a Buddhist priest and a temple minister. How lamentable, how silly is that? Lock them up. But will winning solve the problem? Or will it make it worse? So when we return to the wisdom of Shakyamuni Buddha, victory only breeds hatred, for the defeated live in misery. But a person abandoning ideas of victory and defeat realizes inner peace and lives happily. The words of Shakyamuni Buddha in the Dhammapada, verse 201. Namo Amida Butsu. So if my side wins, by definition, the other side loses. Victory, defeat. And the cycle of anger, hatred, and violence continues. Thus, to realize inner peace, the Buddha says we must abandon the very ideas of victory and defeat. Winning, losing, winners, losers. Now, obviously, that's not going to be easy, because from a Shin Buddhist perspective, we are all hopelessly attached to ourself. And thus, our thoughts, words, and actions are driven by our fundamental self-centeredness, which leads to anger, greed, and stupidity. So again, remember that the three poisons are only 108 of the blind passions that cause physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual suffering in human life. Shinran Shonin, the founder of the Jodo Shinshu Honganji tradition, lived in a time of civil war and famine and pandemic diseases in Japan of the 12th and 13th century. And Shinran says, I know nothing of what is good or evil, for if I could know thoroughly, as is known in the mind of Amida, that an act was good, then I would know the meaning of good. If I could know thoroughly, as Amida knows, that an act was evil, then I would know evil. But for a foolish being full of blind passions, in this fleeting world, this burning house, all matters without exception are lies and gibberish, totally without truth and sincerity. The Nembutsu alone is true and real. The wisdom of Shinran Shonin, quoted in the Tanisho, a record of lament and different divergences. This is in the epilogue section. Namo Amida Butsu. So Shinran Shonin's teaching, is simply the Nembutsu alone is true and real. The great compassion and great love of Amida, Namo Amida Butsu, is true and real. Everything else in this samsara world of delusion and confusion are lies and gibberish. Shinran's teaching is about absolute truth, not secular truth. Right? So Shinran's teachings make a very clear distinction between this absolute truth, this absolute reality, and secular truth or secular reality. So the absolute truth that Shinran teaches is to find refuge, to take refuge in the great compassion and great love of Amida, Namo Amida Butsu, because it is true and real. Everything else in this world of delusion and confusion that we live in, right, are lies and gibberish. Shinran's teaching is about absolute truth, not secular truth. So the absolute truth is that the faith of Shinjin, in trusting in the all-embracing compassion and all-inclusive wisdom that is Amida Buddha. In a critical and cynical world, samsara, the world of confusion and delusion that we live in as human beings, right, in this burning house that we live in today, only the Nembutsu is true and real. In 2005, I was asked to give a Buddhist aspiration at an interfaith gathering of religious and spiritual traditions. I tried to share the Dharma of Buddhism in words and concepts that avoided specific doctrinal terminology of Shinran's teachings. So as we enter the new year, I'd like to share that aspiration to conclude today's talk. Let us be grateful for this moment together, united by our aspiration to see the world as it is, not as we would like it to be, so that we may alleviate suffering for all beings. Let us be wise so that we can see both sides of conflict with clarity and not insist that we alone are right. Let us be compassionate so that we can help all people without discrimination or judgment. Let us be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than ourselves. Let us allow the aloha in our hearts to manifest as mahalo for the great ohana of life and the blessings of the aina. In the Honganji tradition, we express our gratitude for all-inclusive wisdom and all-embracing compassion in this unrepeatable life by placing our palms together, bowing our heads and saying, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namo Amida Buddha, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu. The essence of Shin Buddhism is the faith of Shinjin, Amida's great love and great compassion, transforming our all too human hearts and minds so that we are empowered to respond in gratitude to this unrepeatable life as it unfolds naturally. Just say mahalo. Mahalo for listening this morning, and may your day be filled with aloha. Actually, may your year be filled with aloha. Namandats.